My name is Clara Monroe, and for 22 years, my life was a quiet composition of carefully curated harmonies. I was the steadfast rhythm section to my husband Marcus's soaring melody. I grew up in a small town in the shadow of the mountains, a place where roots run deep and expectations are as clear as the creek water. I was raised to be a supportive partner, a steady hand, a quiet harbor. And I was good at it. When Marcus and I married, I poured myself into creating the perfect backdrop for his ambition. Our home in the tranquil, tree-lined suburb of Crestwood was my canvas, a sprawling colonial with a garden I nurtured into a riot of color, two bright, wonderful children, Nina and Alex, and a life that, from the outside, looked as flawless as a magazine spread. Marcus was a senior director at Ethel Corp., a sprawling tech firm downtown. His career was his sun, and our family were the planets orbiting it. I understood this. I accepted it. I even took pride in it, telling myself that his success was our success. His triumphs, I believed, were a reflection of the stable, loving home I had so diligently built. The evening it all began to unravel was a Tuesday in late October. A chill was in the air, a scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves that always made our home feel cozier. I'd spent the afternoon preparing Marcus's favorite meal, a slow-roasted chicken with rosemary and lemon, its skin burnished to a perfect, crackling gold. His mother, Eleanor, was with us for dinner, a weekly tradition. The chicken was still sending plumes of fragrant steam into the air when Marcus's phone, lying face up on the polished mahogany of the dining table, lit up with a message. I watched his face as he read it, a subtle shift in his expression that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't alarm or concern. It was something closer to anticipation. He placed his fork down beside his barely touched plate. "I'm sorry," he announced to the room at large, already pushing his chair back. "Camilla needs me at the office. An urgent issue with the quarterly projections." He didn't look at me. He didn't offer a more detailed explanation or genuine apology. He simply stood, retrieved his briefcase from the hall, and walked to the door. "I'll be late," he called over his shoulder, and then he was gone, the solid thud of the front door sealing the silence he left behind. We sat there for a moment, suspended in the sudden vacuum. Nina, at 15, had her phone discreetly under the table, but her thumbs were still. Alex, my 12-year-old, stared at his father's empty chair, a forkful of mashed potatoes halfway to his mouth. Eleanor, ever composed, dabbed the corners of her mouth with her linen napkin. "Well," she said, her voice smooth and certain, "a man's career must come first. Camilla is his boss, after all. You can't say no to something like that." She said it with such unwavering approval that the cold feeling in my chest solidified into a knot of ice. I had heard variations of this sentiment for 2 decades. It was the family mantra, the justification for every canceled plan, every missed school play, every holiday dinner he arrived late for. "Is Dad coming back for dessert?" Alex asked, his voice small. "I don't think so, sweetheart," I managed, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I cut another piece of chicken, the meat tender, the flavor lost on me. "He's helping his boss with something very important for his job." Eleanor nodded, her silver hair catching the light from the chandelier. "That's right, Clara. You've always been so good about this. So many wives would throw a fit, start making calls. But you understand the demands of a high-powered career. It's what makes your marriage so strong." I smiled and nodded, playing my part. But inside, a series of quiet, insistent questions began to bloom like nightshade. Why would his boss need him at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening for a projections issue that could surely wait until morning? And why had his phone screen, in the split second before he snatched it up, seemed to glow with an almost personal warmth? The rest of the meal was an exercise in forced normalcy. Eleanor recounted the plot of the latest historical novel from her book club. Nina talked about her upcoming history midterm. Alex debated the merits of his favorite video game characters. It was the familiar cadence of our family life, but with a dissonant, gaping silence where Marcus should have been. After dinner, as I cleared the plates, Eleanor followed me into the kitchen, carrying the serving platter. "You know, Clara," she began, setting the platter on the granite countertop, "I've always admired your trust in Marcus. You should be very proud. He has so much potential, especially with a mentor like Camilla guiding him. She's a brilliant woman, very driven." Something in the way she lingered on Camilla's name, a certain knowing emphasis, made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I turned on the tap, the rush of hot water a welcome noise. "How long has she been mentoring him?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral as I squeezed soap onto a sponge. "Oh, 4 months now. He's told me all about their late-night work sessions, the weekend strategy meetings. That's the sort of dedication it takes to get to the executive level these days. You have to be willing to put in the hours." "Months." He'd been having late night, weekend meetings with his female boss for months, and I was hearing about it now, not from my husband, but from his mother, delivered as a testament to his ambition. I scrubbed at a plate, watching the soap bubbles swirl and pop, each one a tiny, iridescent lie. The children settled in the living room to watch a movie, and Eleanor joined them. I remained in the sanctuary of the kitchen, methodically washing and drying each dish, my mind replaying the evening. The house felt unnaturally quiet with Marcus gone, not peaceful, but expectant, like the held breath before a storm. At 9:30, I tucked the children into bed. Alex asked again when Dad would be home, and I told him it would likely be very late. Nina gave me a long, searching hug, as if she sensed the tremor in my carefully constructed world. By 10, Eleanor was gathering her coat and scarf. "Tell Marcus I said goodnight," she said, kissing my cheek. "And remember what I said, dear. You're a wonderful, supportive wife. He's a very lucky man." After she left, I sat in the living room, the television off, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Marcus's contact. I could text him. "How's work? When will you be home?" But I didn't. The woman who would have sent those fretful, anxious messages felt suddenly distant, like a character from a book I'd read long ago. Instead, I went upstairs and drew a bath. As I soaked in the steaming, lavender-scented water, I let the evening's events play out again in my mind. Marcus's quick escape, Eleanor's knowing praise, the emphasis she placed on Camilla. A deep, instinctual certainty settled in my bones. Something was fundamentally wrong. But alongside the fear, another feeling began to surface. It was a strange and unfamiliar sense of clarity, as if a low-grade fog I hadn't even realized I was living in had finally begun to lift. For 22 years, I had been the perfect, understanding wife. I had trusted Marcus implicitly, never questioning his late nights, his weekend work commitments, his sudden business trips. I had accepted every explanation, believing it was my duty. But sitting there in the quiet solitude of the bathroom, I realized that woman was gone. In her place was someone new, someone cooler and more observant. Someone who was tired of taking things at face value. When I stepped out of the bath, I went to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Marcus's pillow still held the faint, spicy scent of his aftershave. A tie he'd worn that day was draped over the valet stand. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. I didn't check my phone for a message. I didn't part the curtains to see if his car was in the driveway. Instead, I opened the drawer of my bedside table and took out a slim leather-bound journal I hadn't touched in years. On a fresh page, I began to write. I wrote down the time the message had arrived, Marcus's exact words, Eleanor's comments, the look on his face. Then I started writing down other things, small, seemingly insignificant details I had dismissed over the past few months. Canceled dinner dates. The faint, sweet scent of a perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his coat. Vague answers to simple questions about his day. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I closed the journal and slipped it back into the drawer. Tomorrow, I would start paying attention. Really paying attention. Not as the trusting wife who believed her husband's every word, but as a woman who deserved the truth. I turned off the light and lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was with Camilla. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't going to assume it was innocent. Marcus slipped into bed at 2:17 a.m. I knew the exact time because I'd been awake, watching the soft red glow of the alarm clock. He moved with practiced stealth, trying not to disturb me, but I caught the scent immediately, a sophisticated blend of sandalwood and something floral, a perfume I recognized as expensive but not my own. "Sorry," he whispered into the darkness, his breath warm against my ear. Emergency meeting ran long. I kept my own breathing even and slow, a perfect imitation of sleep. My hand, hidden under the covers, was curled into a fist. In my mind, I was already reaching for the journal. The following weeks were an education in pattern recognition. Tuesday nights became sacrosanct for urgent project deadlines. Thursday evenings were reserved for client dinners that were apparently non-negotiable. Weekend mornings were often punctuated by hushed phone calls he would take while pacing in the backyard, his back to the house. I became a quiet, meticulous archivist of my own life's slow-motion collapse. My journal filled with entries, each one a small cold stone of fact. November 5th, left at 7:45 p.m. said the Ethel Corp server crashed. Returned at 12:50 a.m. shirt collar rumpled. Smelled faintly of wine and that same sandalwood perfume. November 14th, weekend team-building retreat in the city. Required an overnight bag. Said it was mandatory for all senior management. The children felt the shift. Nina grew quieter, her observations more pointed. Dad works more than any of my friends' dads, she commented one evening over a dinner of takeout pizza, just the three of us. Alex, my sweet, open-hearted boy, simply stopped asking when his father would be home. They were adapting as children do, but I saw the quiet hurt in their eyes during our increasingly frequent solo meals. 3 weeks into my silent investigation, I found myself at the Ethel Corp annual holiday mixer. In previous years, I'd found these events tedious, a performance of polite smiles and stilted conversation. This year it felt like a reconnaissance mission. I wore a simple black dress, mingled with a practiced ease, and listened. I listened to conversations I would have once tuned out, searching for threads for clues. That's when I saw Victor Monroe properly for the first time. He was standing near the towering Christmas tree, a tall, distinguished man with silvering temples and kind, intelligent eyes. I knew he was Camilla's husband, but we'd only ever exchanged brief pleasantries at past events. "Clara, isn't it?" he said, approaching me with a warm, though slightly reserved, smile. "Marcus's wife." "Yes," I smiled back. "And you're Victor, Camilla's husband." We made small talk about the usual subjects, the dreadful holiday traffic, the surprisingly good catering, the way these corporate functions all bleed into one another. He was charming and articulate, but there was a carefulness about him, a wall I could sense but not see. "Marcus has been working so closely with Camilla lately," I said, my voice light, as if making a casual observation. "He's been putting in such long hours." Victor paused, his wine glass halfway to his lips. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, recognition, weariness, a shared secret, crossed his face. It was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Yes," he said slowly, his eyes meeting mine over the rim of his glass. "She's mentioned there, collaborative projects." The way he enunciated the word collaborative was deliberate, freighted with a meaning he wasn't explicitly sharing. My stomach tightened. "They seem to make a very effective team," I pushed, watching his reaction. Victor studied me for a long moment, a silent conversation passing between us. "Do they?" he finally said. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement, perhaps even an invitation. He knew. Or at least he suspected. "I should probably go find Marcus," I said, excusing myself. But as I walked away, I felt Victor's gaze on my back. We were two strangers on opposite sides of the same invisible, painful battlefield. 2 nights later, the opportunity one hadn't even known I was waiting for presented itself. Marcus had come home late, exhausted, and fallen asleep on the living room sofa, his laptop still open on the coffee table beside him. He was usually so meticulous about closing it down, but fatigue had made him careless. My heart hammered against my ribs as I knelt on the floor and tilted the screen toward me. I had never snooped. In 22 years, I had never felt the need. But sitting there in the pale blue glow of the screen, I knew I was about to cross a threshold from which there was no return. His email was open. The first few messages were innocuous work correspondence. Then I saw it, a folder labeled simply C. My breath caught. I clicked on it. Dozens of email chains between Marcus and Camilla cascaded down the screen, dating back almost a year. The early ones were professional, but the tone gradually shifted, becoming more intimate, filled with shared jokes, complaints about coworkers, and eventually, complaints about their spouses. Then I found the photographs. Nothing explicit, but intimate in a way that felt like a physical blow. Camilla laughing over a candlelit dinner, her eyes sparkling. Marcus in what was clearly a hotel room, making a silly face for the camera. Snapshots from business trips I had never questioned. My hands trembled as I scrolled deeper. Hotel confirmations for 2. Restaurant reservations for romantic bistros I'd always wanted to try. Entire text conversations forwarded to email for safekeeping, filled with the private language of inside jokes and coded references. But it was their words about me that truly shattered me. In one email, Marcus had written, "Clara has been so needy lately. I think it's some kind of midlife crisis. She's constantly asking where I am, what I'm doing. It's exhausting." Camilla had replied, "You're far too patient. Some women simply don't appreciate what it takes to be a truly successful man. They want to keep you small." I found myself mentioned again and again, a caricature of a wife he had created to justify his betrayal. The wife is clueless. She's too wrapped up in her garden and the kids' school schedules to notice anything. Clara thinks I'm at another budget meeting. Her naivete is almost charming. The message that broke me was from 3 weeks ago, the week before that first Tuesday dinner. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I hadn't settled down so young. Clara used to be fun, more adventurous. But marriage and motherhood, They turned her into someone who just worries about PTA meetings and whether the lawn is mowed. Being with you, Cam, reminds me what it feels like to be with an equal. I sat there staring at the screen until the words blurred. 22 years of my life, of my love, of my unwavering support, reduced to a complaint about PTA meetings. He didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as a relic of a life he had outgrown. A noise from the sofa, Marcus stirring in his sleep, jerked me back to reality. My hands moved with a strange, cold precision. I grabbed my phone and began taking pictures of the screen. Email after email, photo after photo, reservation after reservation. I documented everything, uploading the images to a secure cloud account I created on the spot. By the time Marcus mumbled and started to sit up, I had closed the laptop, cleared the recently taken photos from my phone's gallery, and was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a glass as if I'd just come down for water. Sorry, must have dozed off, he said, rubbing his eyes as he walked into the kitchen. He came up behind me and kissed my cheek. Long day. No problem, I said, my voice steady, my back to him. There's leftover roast chicken if you're hungry. He made a sandwich while I finished my task. We moved around each other in the familiar choreography of our shared kitchen, but the space between us felt charged, dangerous. Probably another late one tomorrow, he said, taking a large bite of his sandwich. Camilla and I have to finalize the presentation for the board. Of course you do, I said quietly. He gave me a sharp look. Are you all right? You seem distant. I turned to face him then, my expression carefully neutral. I studied his face, the face I had loved for more than half my life. Was that guilt I saw in his eyes or just irritation at being questioned? I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just tired. But I wasn't fine. I was something else entirely. I was awake. And for the first time I was seeing my husband not as the man I had married, but as the man he had become. A stranger who could write me off as a nagging wife while carrying on an affair with his boss, all while sleeping in my bed. As he headed upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen, staring at my own faint reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. Someone who possessed a devastating secret and was just beginning to figure out what to do with it. I was no longer just building a home. I was planning a demolition. The idea took root 3 days later in the most mundane of places, the grocery store. I was in the bakery aisle, watching a young woman excitedly describe the custom photo cake she was ordering for her fiancé's surprise party. It's going to be so romantic, she gushed. Our first picture together right on the cake. And that's when it hit me. A plan fully formed and shockingly clear. Marcus's 45th birthday was in 6 weeks. He'd been dropping hints for months, talking about wanting a significant celebration to mark the milestone, something that would reflect his professional stature. He deserved it, he'd said, after all his hard work this year. Perfect. That evening, I broached the subject over dinner. Marcus, I've been thinking about your birthday. I began, my tone bright and enthusiastic. I think we should throw you a proper party. A big one. His face lit up. Really? I thought you weren't a fan of big parties. Well, you've worked so incredibly hard this year, I said, looking him directly in the eye. All those late nights, those weekend meetings. I think it's time everyone, especially your colleagues, saw how much I appreciate your dedication. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, his expression one of pure gratitude. You're amazing, Clara. I know I've been a bit absent lately, but it will all be worth it when I land this promotion. I want to invite everyone from Ethel Corp, I continued, letting him believe his charm was working. The whole team, the executives. I want them all to see what a strong, supportive family you have behind you. For the next few weeks, I became a whirlwind of party planning efficiency, a performance that even impressed Eleanor. I booked the main hall at the Crestwood Community Center, hired a well-regarded caterer, and designed elegant invitations. The guest list was extensive, including every single person from Marcus's department, his superiors, and of course Camilla and her husband Victor. When I called Camilla to invite her personally, her voice was laced with surprise. Clara, how thoughtful. Of course I wouldn't miss it. Wonderful, I said, my voice sweet as honey. I do hope Victor can come as well. I know you both lead such busy lives. I'll ask him, she said, a new cautious note in her tone. 2 days later, Victor called me himself. Clara, this is Victor Monroe. I'm calling to thank you for the invitation to Marcus's party. Of course, I replied. We're so looking forward to having you both there. There was a significant pause on the line. I have a feeling, he said, his voice low and deliberate, that it will be a most illuminating evening. A celebration to remember, as your invitation so aptly put it. The way he said illuminating sent a clear signal. He didn't know the details, but he knew the curtain was about to rise on a drama he'd long suspected was playing out in the wings. I'm glad you think so, I said carefully. I will be there, he confirmed. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The hardest part was maintaining the facade with Marcus. He was giddy with excitement, constantly asking for details, trying to peek at my notes. It's a surprise, I'd say, smiling serenely. Just trust me. It's going to be perfect. 3 weeks before the party, I made a trip to a specialty bakery on the far side of town, one renowned for its custom creations. I'd made an appointment with the owner, a no-nonsense woman named Sophia. I need a cake with an edible image, I explained, for my husband's 45th birthday, something that will really make an impression. She showed me a portfolio of her work. Family portraits, corporate logos, intricate designs, all flawlessly rendered in frosting. What kind of image are you thinking of? She asked. I took out my phone and showed her a screenshot I had carefully composed. It was a collage of text messages between Marcus and Camilla. The most damning ones, where they mocked me and our life together. I'd formatted it to look like a chat window. Clara's naivete is almost charming. She's too wrapped up in her garden. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. Ma'am, this is very personal. It's for a very personal celebration, I said. She studied the image, then looked at me, her gaze sharp. Are you sure about this? Once this is on the cake, there's no going back. I'm absolutely certain. She gave a slow nod. It's your party. It will cause one hell of a scene, you know. I looked her straight in the eye. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The week of the party, Marcus was practically vibrating with anticipation. Make sure you get a lot of photos of me with the regional manager, he instructed me. This party could be a major career move. Don't worry, I assured him. This party will definitely be memorable. The day of the party arrived, crisp and clear. I spent the afternoon at the venue, overseeing the final touches. The lighting had to be just right, the music sophisticated, the floral arrangements elegant. Everything had to be perfect. At 5 o'clock, I drove to the bakery. The cake was a masterpiece. A large rectangular cake cloaked in smooth dark chocolate fondant. In elegant silver script it read, Happy 45th birthday, Marcus. The incriminating image was concealed beneath a removable sugar panel, artfully decorated to look like part of the design. Last chance to back out, Sophia said as she helped me load it into my car. No second thoughts, I replied, my hand steady on the wheel. By the time I arrived back at the community center, guests were streaming in. I greeted everyone with a warm, genuine smile, playing the part of the adoring wife. Marcus was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, his arm possessively around my waist. Camilla arrived in a striking crimson dress, her confidence radiating. She kissed my cheek, complimenting the decor. This is all so lovely, Clara. You didn't have to bring a gift, I said sweetly as she handed me an expensive-looking bag. Your presence is more than enough. Victor appeared behind her, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. He shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes searching mine. Thank you for having us, he said quietly. As I said, I'm sure it will be an evening to remember. Dinner was a success. I even gave a toast, speaking eloquently about partnership, loyalty, and the importance of honesty in a long marriage. Marcus beamed, squeezing my hand under the table, no doubt imagining how this display of wifely devotion was playing with his superiors. Eleanor, seated at the head table, dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. You two are such an inspiration, she announced to those around her. Finally, it was time. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, my voice carrying through the suddenly quiet room. If I could have your attention. It's time for the birthday cake. A ripple of applause went through the hall. I wheeled out the cake on a trolley, a polished silver dome hiding it from view. Marcus stood beside me, glowing with pride and anticipation. Make a wish, darling, I said. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the 45 candles. The room erupted in cheers and another round of happy birthday. And now, I said, my voice clear and steady, for the real surprise. With a theatrical flourish, I lifted the dome. For a moment, the guests just saw the beautiful chocolate cake and the elegant script. Then, with a surgeon's precision, I lifted away the decorative sugar panel from the center. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a dense, heavy silence, broken only by the soft click of a few phones still recording. People leaned in, squinting, their smiles freezing and melting into confusion. Then shock. Then a sort of horrified fascination. There, in perfect edible clarity, were Marcus's own words. His betrayal served up for dessert. Marcus's face went corpse-white as he stared at the cake. For a terrible, frozen moment, no one moved. Then, with a strangled cry, he lunged forward, his hands scrabbling to smudge the frosting, to erase his own words. "This is a fake," he choked out, his voice cracking. "Someone photoshopped this. It's a sick joke." But it was too late. Margaret from accounting was already holding up her phone, the flash stark in the dim light. Then came a flash from David in marketing, and another and another. "Stop!" Marcus yelled, spinning around, his eyes wild. "Put your phones away." But the evidence was already captured, already being shared. I watched, a strange, calm spectator at the implosion of my own life as the truth rippled through the room. I saw faces shift from disbelief to dawning comprehension. I heard the whispers start. "Is that real?" murmured a woman from Human Resources. "Is that Camilla Monroe's name?" asked someone from Sales, pointing at the message thread. Camilla herself had turned to stone beside the dessert table. Her face was a mask of pale shock, her crimson-painted lips slightly parted. She looked at Marcus, then at the cake, then at the sea of staring faces. But it was her husband, Victor, who held my attention. He wasn't looking at the cake. He was looking at his wife, and his expression was not one of anger or hurt. It was cold, clear, and utterly calculating. He was seeing her, finally, without illusion, and filing away the information. "Victor," Camilla whispered, taking a step toward him, her hand outstretched. "This isn't what it looks like." He took a deliberate step back, away from her touch. "Isn't it?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the murmurs like a blade. In those two words, I heard the weight of years, years of her late nights, her unexplained trips, of him playing the role of the supportive, trusting husband. "We should go," Camilla said, her voice rising in pitch. "We can discuss this at home." Victor's gaze swept the room, taking in the shocked faces, the recording phones, the glorious, damning mess of chocolate and betrayal. "Yes," he said finally. "I think we should." He turned and walked toward the exit with a measured, unhurried stride. He didn't look back. Camilla stood frozen for a moment, then, with a choked sob, she ran after him, her heels clicking a frantic retreat on the polished floor. "Clara!" Marcus's voice, raw and desperate, cut through the din. He was standing beside the ruined cake, frosting smeared on his hands like blood. "We need to talk. Now." I looked at him, at the man who had called my love and my life's work, naive and clinging, and I felt a profound and liberating emptiness. The anger had burned away, leaving behind something cool and hard as steel. "Why?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "How could you do this to me? Humiliate me in front of everyone?" "Humiliate you?" A small, dry laugh escaped my lips. "Marcus, those are your words. Your choices. I didn't write those messages. I just served the cake. They were private." "Were they?" "It seemed your private opinion of me was public knowledge between you and Camilla. Was I supposed to continue playing the part of the clueless wife for your convenience?" His mother, Eleanor, materialized at his side, her face a mottled mask of fury and shame. "Clara, this is appalling. You have ruined your husband." "Have I?" I asked, my voice calm and clear. "Or have I simply revealed him?" I looked at her, the woman who had coached me for years on how to be a properly invisible, supportive wife. "You made me feel small for wanting a husband who came home for dinner. You praised his ambition as he lied to my face. This isn't my ruin, Eleanor. This is the truth." I turned back to Marcus. "You made me invisible," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "This is just me, finally showing up." I walked away before either of them could respond. I collected my purse and my coat and headed for the exit, leaving the shambles of the party behind me. I could hear Marcus calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I already knew everything I needed to know. 3 days later, I was sitting in the plush office of Helen Foster, the most reputable family law attorney in Crestwood. Across the polished mahogany desk, I pushed a thick binder. This is very thorough, Helen said, her eyebrows raised as she flipped through the printed emails, the annotated credit card statements, the crystal-clear photos of the cake. I had good motivation, I replied. So you're ready to file for divorce? No, I said, and she looked up, surprised. I want a legal separation. May I ask why? Control, I said simply. If we divorce, it's a clean break. He's free to move on. A legal separation is a constant reminder. He remains legally married to that nagging, clueless wife he so despised. He can't remarry. And every month, when that spousal support payment is due, he'll be reminded of the exact cost of his choices. A slow, appreciative smile spread across Helen Foster's face. Mrs. Monroe, she said. I think we're going to get along just fine. The fallout was swift and spectacular. The story of the birthday cake became a local legend overnight. The day after the party, Marcus called me, his voice hollow. Camilla's been fired, he said. Victor Monroe isn't just her husband. He's the majority shareholder of Ethel Corporation. He convened an emergency board meeting this morning. I see, I said, picturing Victor's cold, calculating face at the party. He hadn't just been a cuckolded husband. He had been a titan of industry watching an underling betray his trust. They're restructuring my department, Marcus continued, his voice thin. I'm going to be next, Clara. I'm going to lose everything. You already did, I said, and hung up. The legal paperwork was served to Marcus at his now much smaller office. The separation agreement was ironclad, thanks to the binder of evidence. He would pay significant spousal and child support, and I would retain the house. Eleanor called, of course. Think of the children, Clara, she pleaded. This public spectacle. I am thinking of them, I cut her off. I'm teaching them that self-respect is non-negotiable. I'm teaching my daughter not to accept the kind of behavior you encouraged me to tolerate for 20 years. And I'm teaching my son how a man of integrity ought to behave. I paused, then delivered the final, quiet blow. Besides, Eleanor, you always told me a career should come first. Well, this is my new career. I'm the CEO of my own life now. The silence on the other end of the line was deeply satisfying. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. The quiet in my house was no longer heavy with unspoken tension, it was light, filled with peace. Nina and Alex began to blossom, relieved of the weight of a fracturing family. We had long rambling dinners filled with laughter. We took spontaneous weekend trips to the coast. I was rediscovering not only my children but myself. I started a book club, reconnected with old friends, and even received a quiet, respectful email from Victor Monroe, thanking me for providing the clarity he had lacked the courage to seek for himself. Then an email arrived from a woman I didn't know. I heard your story from a friend of a friend, she wrote. I'm going through something similar. My husband and his mother both tell me I'm being paranoid. Would you be willing to have coffee? We met the following Saturday. Her story was a haunting echo of my own. As I listened, I shared what I had learned, not just about uncovering deceit, but about rediscovering one's own worth. When we parted, she had tears in her eyes, but her shoulders were straighter. That one coffee meeting turned into another, then another. Soon I was hosting a small group of women in my living room every Thursday evening. We called it the Cake Club. We shared stories, offered advice, and drew strength from one another. We were a quiet, powerful collective of women who were done being invisible. 6 months after the party, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. He looked tired and diminished. We exchanged a few awkward, polite words about the children. I hear you're doing workshops, he said, unable to meet my eye. I am, I said, my voice warm and steady. It's going very well. He nodded, a flicker of something regret, perhaps in his eyes. Good, he said quietly. That's good, Clara. I'm glad. I gave him a small, genuine smile. Take care of yourself, Marcus. And I walked away, pushing my cart toward the checkout, my heart light and entirely my own. I didn't just get revenge. I got my life back. The best revenge I had learned wasn't a bitter dish served cold. It was a rich, satisfying life, lived beautifully and entirely on one's own terms. And that was the sweetest victory of all.